Inside prison birthdays, the dark reality of ADX Florence, Rikers Island and Pelican Bay. The birthday that shouldn't have happened. The lights never turned off inside the cell. The concrete walls were still cold, and the iron bars still unbreakable. But tonight, inside ADX Florence, America's most notorious Supermax prison, something different was happening. An inmate sat alone with a piece of stale bread, a melted chocolate bar smuggled through layers of hands, and a plastic fork carved into the shape of a candle. It was his birthday. Then, from somewhere down the tier, another prisoner began to bang on his door. Boop, boop, boop. Within seconds, the entire block erupted, metal doors shaking, voices echoing. "Happy birthday, bro." But this wasn't joy. This was rebellion. A small moment of celebration in a place designed to crush the human spirit. Guards stormed in, shouting orders, dragging men from their cells. A cake made of commissary ramen and Kool-Aid ended with pepper spray and handcuffs. Birthdays in prison are not about joy. They are about survival. And the darkest stories come from three of America's most feared prisons: ADX Florence, Rikers Island, and Pelican Bay. So the question is, how do men celebrate life in a place that was built to erase it? The first prison candle. It begins at Rikers Island, New York City's massive jail complex. Here, birthdays aren't marked by balloons or laughter. They're marked by whatever scraps inmates can pull together. Sometimes it's a honey bun with a matchstick stuck inside. Other times, it's just a packet of Kool-Aid poured into a cup of sink water, passed from hand to hand. But that night, in a dorm packed with 40 men, one inmate decided to risk it all. He had convinced a kitchen worker to sneak out a slice of cake. It was smuggled inside a plastic bag, hidden inside a laundry cart, passed from cell to cell like contraband gold. The moment he pulled it out, the dorm went silent. For 1 second, it wasn't Rikers. It was a birthday party. Men clapped. Others sang. And the inmate, eyes glassy, whispered, "It's the first real cake I've had in years." But joy doesn't last long in Rikers. Within minutes, the COs busted in. They ripped the cake away, slammed inmates against the wall, and shouted, "You think this is a party? Not in here." The celebration was over. The dorm turned into chaos, tables flipped, fists flying. A single birthday candle had lit the fuse. And this was just the beginning. Pelican Bay, the silent celebration. Deep in Northern California, Pelican Bay State Prison holds some of the most dangerous men in America. Here, in the security housing unit, birthdays look nothing like the outside world. Inmates spend 23 hours a day locked in their cells, with no cakes, no singing, and no visitors bringing gifts. The walls are thick, and silence is the only soundtrack. But even inside this silence, men find ways to mark the day. One inmate, known only by the name Reyes, scratched the date of his birthday into the concrete wall each year. No cake, no cards, just a mark on the wall, one line stacked on another, counting the years he was still alive. To him, it wasn't about celebration. It was about proof. I made it another year in hell. But sometimes silence breaks. In one rare moment, a group of inmates in neighboring cells decided to create a gift for a man's birthday. They passed a kite, a tiny paper note tied to a thread, sliding it under their doors, through cracks, and across the tier. When the note finally reached the birthday inmate, it contained just 3 words. "Still with us." That message meant more than any cake. It meant survival, unity, brotherhood in a place designed to tear it all away. But then, guards discovered the chain of notes. And what began as a quiet act of solidarity turned violent. The officers stormed the SHU, ripping up beds, tossing belongings, and dragging prisoners out in shackles. One man resisted, and was slammed face-first onto the concrete, blood spilling across the floor. The birthday gift had ended in screams. And if Pelican Bay was brutal, ADX Florence would take it even further. ADX Florence, the day of no sky. In the heart of Colorado sits ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America. Here, birthdays are almost meaningless. Prisoners are locked alone in concrete cells for 23 hours a day. Their meals slide through a small slot in the door. The only view of the world is a tiny slit of sky, too narrow to even see the sun rise or set. But even here, men try to hold onto their humanity. On his birthday, one inmate took the cornbread from his tray, shaped it into a rough square, and pressed a piece of hard candy on top. It was a cake that crumbled in his hands. He whispered to himself, "Happy birthday, old man," because there was no one else to say it. Sometimes, the only gift an inmate could give himself was memory. One man closed his eyes and imagined his mother's voice singing to him from decades earlier. Another hummed a tune he once heard at a child's party. For a few minutes, he wasn't in ADX, he was outside, free. But fantasy never lasts here. That same night, guards conducted a surprise search. They tore through cells looking for contraband. When they reached the man's room, they found the hardened cornbread cake. The officer picked it up, laughed, and crushed it in his fist before tossing it in the trash. The inmate stared, silent, until his chest heaved. He pounded the wall until his knuckles split, screaming words that echoed down the concrete corridor. In ADX Florence, even a birthday could end in blood. But the darkest story of all was yet to come, back inside Rikers Island, where a birthday celebration spiraled into something far worse than broken cake. Rikers Island, the birthday riot. Rikers has always been unpredictable. One moment, the dorms are quiet, men lying on their bunks, radios buzzing with static. The next, it's chaos. On this particular night, an inmate named Deshawn turned 21 years old. For most people, that birthday means freedom, drinks, laughter, friends. But inside Rikers, it meant nothing. Still, his cellmates wanted to make it feel different. They pooled their commissary, a honey bun, 2 packets of peanut butter, and crushed up cookies. Pressed together, it became a lopsided cake. They lit a tiny piece of toilet paper as a candle, shielding the flame from the guard's view. For a moment, Deshawn smiled like he hadn't in years. But the smell of smoke traveled fast. Guards rushed in. One officer shouted, "Who lit the fire?" He grabbed Deshawn by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. The honey bun cake hit the floor, smashing into crumbs. The dorm erupted. Inmates started shouting, some throwing chairs, others banging fists on the tables. One prisoner swung a mop handle at a guard. Another ripped off his shirt, screaming, "It's just a birthday." The officers called for backup. Pepper spray filled the air, men coughed and choked, eyes burning. Within minutes, the party turned into a riot, batons clashing, bodies hitting the floor. When the chaos finally died down, Deshawn sat in handcuffs, his birthday cake crushed into dust beneath his feet. But even this wasn't the worst. Across the country, inside Pelican Bay, one birthday would lead to something even darker, a secret pact that changed everything. Pelican Bay, the Pact. Pelican Bay wasn't built for celebration. Inside the SHU, prisoners live in near silence. No parties. No laughter. No hugs from family. Just steel doors and shadows. But on one inmate's birthday, an older lifer named Moreno, the silence broke. His neighbors began tapping on the walls, a code only inmates could understand. Tap tap. It wasn't "happy birthday." It was something deeper. A message of respect. Moreno had survived 20 years in isolation. In prison culture, that kind of endurance meant something. That night, instead of a cake, he was given a gift. His cellmate slid him a rolled-up kite through the cracks in the door. Inside was a single line written in pencil. "When the time comes, we stand together." It wasn't just a note. It was a pact. A promise of loyalty for a future fight. Moreno folded the paper, tucked it beneath his mattress, and whispered, "I'll remember." But the guards were always watching. The next morning, during a routine search, an officer discovered the kite. They knew what it meant. And in Pelican Bay, that kind of loyalty was considered war. Moreno was yanked from his cell, dragged down the corridor, and thrown into disciplinary. As the door slammed shut, he shouted back toward the tier, "Remember the pact." And his voice echoed through the block, seeding fear, hope, and danger all at once. That single birthday gift wasn't just paper. It was the spark of something bigger, something that could shatter Pelican Bay's silence forever. ADX Florence, the forgotten birthday. Inside ADX Florence, most men lose track of time. Days bleed into nights. Weeks vanish into months. Without calendars or parties, birthdays slip away like ghosts. One inmate, his name buried in government files, once confessed that he forgot his own birthday. He only realized it had passed when a lawyer mentioned it weeks later. For him, time wasn't measured in candles or years, but in the number of steps he paced across his cell, 12 forward, 12 back. But not everyone forgets. Some prisoners cling to the date with everything they have. A man once scratched tally marks into the wall for every year he survived, carving them so deep that the concrete split. On his birthday, he pressed his forehead against the wall and whispered each name of his children, one by one. Then came a different kind of birthday. A guard doing rounds stopped at his cell and smirked. "Happy birthday, old man. Guess this is where you'll die." The inmate froze. For years, no one had spoken those words, "Happy birthday." But coming from a guard's mouth, it wasn't kindness. It was cruelty. A reminder that there would be no cake, no family, no freedom. Just concrete, steel, and silence until the very end. That night, the prisoner broke. He slammed his fists into the wall until his hands were bloodied stumps. His screams echoed down the tier, bouncing from cell to cell, until other inmates joined in, pounding their doors, howling like wolves in the dark. For one night, the entire block became a storm. A birthday had turned into a riot of voices, carried through the cold Colorado air. But across the country, Rikers Island was about to show why birthdays there could turn deadly, not with silence, but with chaos. Rikers Island, the deadly gift. Rikers Island has always been unpredictable. For some inmates, a birthday means nothing more than another day in chains. For others, it's an excuse to gamble, hustle, or fight. One summer night, in a crowded dorm, an inmate named Malik turned 25 years old. His crew wanted to mark it. No cake, no balloons. Instead, they gave him something else. A contraband blade, smuggled in through the laundry, wrapped in tape and cloth. "Happy birthday, brother," one of them whispered. "Now you can protect yourself." At first, Malik just held it in his hands. It was supposed to be a gift. But in Rikers, gifts carry weight. They carry expectation. That same night, another inmate, belonging to a rival crew, mocked Malik's celebration. Words turned into shoves. Shoves turned into fists. And then the blade came out. Within seconds, screams filled the dorm. Guards rushed in, but it was too late. Blood streaked across the floor, inmates scattered, and Malik stood trembling, the weapon still in his hand. His birthday had ended not with cake, but with cuffs around his wrists and another charge added to his sentence. The gift had turned into a curse. And if that was the reality at Rikers, then inside Pelican Bay, birthdays weren't just dangerous. They became a test of loyalty, one that could ignite an entire block into war. Pelican Bay, the birthday war. At Pelican Bay, even the smallest moment of humanity can become dangerous. Inside the general population yard, a man named Torres was about to turn 30 years old. For prisoners, hitting 30 behind bars wasn't a milestone, it was a survival badge. His crew wanted to honor him. They gathered up commissary, chips, ramen bricks, Kool-Aid, and built a makeshift spread, laying it out like a feast on the concrete. To anyone else, it looked like a poor man's buffet. But inside Pelican Bay, it was a banquet fit for a king. Other inmates watched from a distance. Some smiled. Others frowned. Because in prison, a birthday spread isn't just food, it's power. It shows who respects you, who has your back, and who might be your enemy. Then came the spark. A rival gang member walked past the spread, smirked, and stomped on a bag of chips. It wasn't just disrespect, it was war. Torres lunged. His crew followed. Within seconds, fists and shanks were flying. The birthday feast exploded into a riot. Guards fired tear gas into the yard. The air filled with choking smoke, men hitting the ground, sirens screaming. By the time it ended, the concrete was littered with broken trays, spilled noodles, and blood. Torres was dragged away in cuffs, his 30th birthday forever marked not by cake, but by carnage. And while Pelican Bay's birthdays could ignite wars, at ADX Florence, the story was even darker, because there, a birthday could vanish into absolute silence, as if it never existed at all. ADX Florence, the birthday that disappeared. In ADX Florence, there are no parties, no visitors with balloons, no family waiting on the other side of glass. Here, the calendar doesn't move forward, it dissolves. One prisoner had been locked in solitary for so long that when a guard mentioned his age, he realized something terrifying. His birthday had come and gone. He hadn't even noticed. No one had sung. No one had marked the date. For the first time in his life, the day meant absolutely nothing. But another inmate, the opposite of forgotten, counted the date obsessively. He etched his birthday into the metal frame of his bunk year after year, marking each one like a scar. When his next birthday arrived, he decided he would not let it vanish quietly. He refused his meal tray. He shouted through the steel door until his voice cracked. He demanded to see a chaplain, demanded to make a phone call, demanded anything that would make the day feel real. The guards ignored him. Hours passed. His shouting grew more desperate. Finally, in a moment of rage, he hurled his metal food tray against the wall. The sound thundered through the block. Other prisoners joined in, banging, yelling, slamming. Within minutes, the tier was chaos. Doors shook. Voices roared. It wasn't a birthday party, it was a riot of ghosts refusing to be forgotten. The officers stormed in, shields up, pepper spray hissing. And as the smoke spread, the sound of coughing and choking swallowed the last echoes of celebration. A birthday had disappeared, but left behind a scar on everyone who lived through it. And while ADX swallowed time, back at Rikers Island, birthdays weren't lost. They were weaponized, turning what should have been joy into pure chaos. Rikers Island, the birthday ambush. On Rikers Island, some birthdays are more than just another day. They're opportunities. Not for cake or music, but for power plays. One inmate named Jermaine was turning 19 years old. His friends inside the dorm hyped him up all day, promising they had a surprise for him that night. In prison, surprises rarely mean something good, but Jermaine believed them. As the lights dimmed, a group of inmates gathered around. They clapped, they joked, they handed him a honey bun with crushed cookies sprinkled on top. Jermaine smiled, thinking for once, maybe this place wasn't so cold. But then the tone shifted. Another group walked in, rival crew, faces hard, eyes locked. The so-called party had been bait. The trap. One inmate shoved Jermaine. Another swung a lock tied inside a sock. Within seconds, fists flew, blood hit the floor. Jermaine was thrown to the ground, boots slamming into his ribs. The birthday celebration turned into an ambush. Guards rushed in, batons cracking, shouting for everyone to hit the ground. The honey bun cake was smashed into the dirt, forgotten in the chaos. Jermaine's 19th birthday ended in the infirmary, broken bones taped up, his smile gone forever. Because in Rikers, a birthday isn't always about joy. Sometimes, it's the perfect setup for revenge. And while Rikers used birthdays as weapons, Pelican Bay would show how even silence on a birthday could push a man to the edge of madness. Pelican Bay, the birthday breakdown. At Pelican Bay's SHU, birthdays come and go like whispers. No visitors. No phone calls. Just 4 gray walls and the sound of your own breathing. One inmate, let's call him Alvarez, had spent nearly 15 years in solitary confinement. Every year, he marked his birthday by scratching another line into the wall. But this year was different. This year he stopped marking. He told himself, what's the point of celebrating when the world has already forgotten me? On the morning of his birthday, guards slid his breakfast tray under the door. Powdered eggs, cold toast, a paper cup of milk. Nothing more, nothing less. Alvarez stared at it, then shoved it back untouched. Hours passed. He began pacing, then muttering, then shouting. It's my birthday. Do you hear me? It's my birthday. His voice cracked against the walls, carried down the empty tier. No one answered. The silence crushed him. In a fit of rage, he tore apart his mattress, ripping it into shreds, hurling stuffing across the cell. When guards finally opened the door, Alvarez charged, screaming like a man possessed. They tackled him to the ground, shackled his arms and legs, and dragged him down the corridor as he shouted, over and over, "It's my birthday!" For Alvarez, the day didn't end with cake or candles. It ended in restraints, his screams echoing into the cold halls of Pelican Bay. And while Pelican Bay drove men into madness through silence, ADX Florence showed another, darker side of birthdays, where even a single memory could destroy a prisoner from the inside. ADX Florence, the memory that killed him. Inside ADX Florence, most men live with silence. No voices. No family. No celebrations. Only memories to keep them alive, or to slowly destroy them. One prisoner, locked away for decades, had survived by holding on to one memory. Every year, on his birthday, he imagined his daughter's voice singing to him. He replayed it over and over in his head, like a broken record, the only gift he had left. But as the years passed, the voice began to fade. The details blurred. He couldn't remember the exact sound anymore. He panicked. On the morning of his birthday, he sat on the edge of his steel bed, whispering, "Sing to me, please sing to me." Nothing came. By nightfall, the panic had grown into despair. He pounded the walls, begging for her voice to return. But there was only silence. Guards ignored him, walking past his cell like he didn't exist. When they returned hours later, the cell was quiet. Too quiet. The man lay on the floor, motionless, a final note scratched into the concrete with a piece of metal from his bed frame. I forgot her song. His birthday, once a lifeline, had become the day he chose to let go. And while ADX showed how memory could kill, back at Rikers Island, birthdays carried another kind of danger, where laughter could flip into violence in the blink of an eye. Rikers Island, the laugh that started a riot. In Rikers, birthdays are rare moments when men try to feel human again. Sometimes they joke, sing, and laugh, even if just for a few seconds. But inside a place where respect is everything, laughter can be deadly. One evening, a group of inmates gathered in the corner of the dorm. It was Darnell's 22nd birthday, and his crew had scraped together a spread, ramen noodles, candy bars, and a honey bun stacked high like a crooked cake. For a moment, the room felt lighter. Someone cracked a joke about Darnell's age, and the whole group burst out laughing. But across the dorm, another inmate, part of a rival crew, thought the laughter was aimed at him. His pride burned. In prison, being laughed at is the same as being disrespected. He stood up, fists clenched, and walked over. The laughter died. The air turned heavy. Without a word, he flipped the birthday spread off the table. Food scattered across the floor. Darnell tried to push him back, shouting, "It's my birthday, man!" But that only made it worse. In an instant, fists started flying. The dorm exploded into chaos, tables crashing, chairs swinging, men stomping and shouting. Guards rushed in, pepper spray cutting through the air, but the riot was already alive. What started as laughter ended with blood dripping across the floor, men being dragged out in cuffs. For Darnell, his birthday wasn't remembered for the jokes. It was remembered for the fight that left half the dorm in lockdown. And while Rikers burned with sudden violence, Pelican Bay was preparing to show how a birthday could become a symbol, not just for one man, but for an entire prison population waiting to strike. Pelican Bay, the birthday signal. In Pelican Bay, everything is watched. Every note passed, every whisper, every look across the yard. But some things slip through the cracks, and sometimes they carry more meaning than the guards realize. It was the birthday of a well-respected shot caller known as Vargas. He had spent over a decade in the SHU, and everyone on the tier knew the date. They couldn't give him a cake. They couldn't give him a gift. But they could give him something else: noise. At exactly midnight, one inmate started tapping on his door. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the entire block pulsed with rhythm. Bang, 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 bang. It wasn't random. It was a code. The beat spelled out Vargas's birthday, each tap a number. To outsiders, it might have sounded like chaos. But to the men inside, it was unity. For Vargas, it wasn't just about turning another year older. It was proof he still had power, even from behind steel doors. That night, His birthday song became something else, a signal that his influence reached every cell. But the celebration didn't end quietly. Guards stormed the tier, ordering silence. When the banging didn't stop, they fired pepper spray into the vents, choking out the entire block. Prisoners coughed, gagged, some collapsing to the floor. Still, the tapping didn't stop. Even as gas filled the air, fists kept hitting the doors, sending one message loud and clear. He's still with us. That birthday turned into a declaration of war, and Pelican Bay would never forget it. And while Pelican Bay used a birthday as a coded uprising, ADX Florence was about to reveal the cruelest truth of all. Sometimes, birthdays weren't remembered, not even by the prisoner himself. ADX Florence, the birthday erased. At ADX Florence, control is absolute. Every detail of an inmate's life is tracked. What time they eat, when they shower, how long they see daylight. But there's one thing that isn't tracked: birthdays. One prisoner asked a guard if he could know the date. Just a simple request: "Is it my birthday today?" The guard smirked and shrugged. "Don't know. Don't care." That was the point. At ADX, even the calendar was stripped away. Birthdays were erased, not by forgetting but by design. For one inmate, that erasure broke something inside him. On what he believed was his birthday, he refused his meal. The next day he refused again. He told the guards, "If you won't let me live my birthday, then I won't live at all." Days passed. His body weakened. Prisoners in nearby cells pounded on their doors, begging officers to do something. But the guards didn't move until his body collapsed on the concrete floor. When they finally dragged him out, his voice was faint, but the words were clear. "You took my life when you took my days." For the men who heard it, that birthday wasn't just forgotten, it was stolen. And while ADX erased birthdays with silence, back at Rikers Island, the opposite was true. A birthday could be loud, reckless, and explosive enough to set the whole jail on fire. Rikers Island, the birthday fire. In Rikers, chaos can erupt over the smallest spark. But on this night, the spark was real. It was Jamal's 20th birthday, and his crew wanted to mark it with more than food. They wanted to make it loud. They wanted the whole dorm to know. So they lit a homemade wick, twisted toilet paper dipped in grease, to create a fake birthday candle. At first, it was a joke. The little flame flickered on top of a honey bun cake. The men laughed, clapped, sang louder than they should have. But the flame caught. The wick dropped, rolling across the bunk. Within seconds, the mattress cover was burning, smoke filling the air. Shouts turned from celebration to panic. Inmates tried to stomp the fire out with bare feet. Others ripped sheets and tossed water from their cups. But it spread too fast. Smoke billowed through the dorm, alarms blaring. Guards rushed in with extinguishers, barking orders. Some inmates coughed and collapsed. Others used the chaos to throw punches, turning the fire into cover for payback. By the time it was over, the dorm was black with soot. Jamal sat in cuffs, watching what was supposed to be his birthday candle turn into a blaze that sent half the block to lockdown. His 20th birthday wasn't remembered with laughter. It was remembered as the night Rikers burned. And while Rikers lit its chaos with fire, Pelican Bay's next story showed how a birthday could bring the coldest kind of betrayal, from those you called brothers. Pelican Bay, the birthday betrayal. In Pelican Bay, loyalty means survival. Crews stick together, protect each other, and share what little they have. But sometimes, a birthday can test that loyalty and reveal betrayal. An inmate named Romero was turning 35. His crew promised him a spread, chips, ramen, and candy bars gathered from commissary. For weeks, he believed them. He bragged across the tier that his brothers had his back. But when the day came, the gift never showed. The food was gone. The candy was traded away. His so-called brothers sat laughing, saying, "We ate it already. Happy birthday, fool." Romero's face fell. In a place where trust was the only currency, betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Hours later, when the yard opened, he snapped. With a sharpened piece of plastic, he lunged at the man he thought was responsible. Guards swarmed instantly, pinning him down, dragging him away. That night, as Romero sat in solitary with blood still on his shirt, He whispered the words again and again. Even my birthday ain't mine. For him, and for so many others, prison birthdays weren't about celebration. They were about loss. Of food, of loyalty, of hope. The dark reality. Birthdays are supposed to mark life, joy, and the passage of time with the people we love. But inside the walls of America's toughest prisons, ADX Florence, Rikers Island, and Pelican Bay, they mean something else. At Rikers, a birthday can turn into a riot, a stabbing, or even a fire. At Pelican Bay, a birthday becomes a test of loyalty, a signal of rebellion, or a trigger for betrayal. And at ADX Florence, the deadliest prison of all, birthdays often vanish into silence, erased from memory, swallowed by concrete, leaving nothing but scars. Inside these places, a birthday is not a celebration. It is survival. It is rebellion. It is madness. It is blood. Because in prison, even the simple act of staying alive for another year is dangerous. And the day that's supposed to remind you of life can just as easily remind you how close you are to losing it.